back. This is Truth Jihad Radio. I'm your host, Kevin Barrett, on the web at truthjihad.com. And I'm talking today about the allegations of chemtrails, poisoning of the planet Earth through the spraying of aluminum, barium, and other toxic metals into the atmosphere. Sounds crazy, but more and more people are collecting more and more evidence that this is going on. And if so, it's outrageous. And, I see a pattern here, folks, in terms of these sorts of absolute outrages. They tend to happen when elites think they know better than everybody else, and so they think they're in an emergency or posit some kind of emergency, which gives them the emergency power to do something completely immoral, evil, outrageous, and psychopathic, supposedly on all of our behalfs. Beginning with, beginning who knows when, but let's start with Pearl Harbor. There we have the FDR and British Brain Trust thinking that it was worth sacrificing thousands of American sailors by drafting an 8-point plan to provoke the Japanese into attacking. And then even though they'd broken the Japanese code and could listen in, better to leave those sailors out there to get slaughtered because we know better than you do. We elites know that there is this emergency going on. The U.S. has to get into the war, and it's worth turning around that 80% American anti-war public opinion through killing, essentially, 2,000 of our own sailors. And, similar events have happened since then. The JFK assassination was done by hardline military intelligence people who thought that we were in an emergency. Here, the Kennedy administration was turning towards peace, even though the U.S. had a big military lead over the Russians. He was going to give it away. What does this guy know? And the people love him. He has to be taken out. Same thing with Martin Luther King. They saw he was heading for a 1 million-man march on Washington, D.C. They were going to camp out there until he got peace and justice and economic redistribution and all of that, and said this is an emergency. Riots are breaking out around this country, and the rioters are citing Dr. King as an inspiration. We've got to take him out. It's once again elites thinking that they know better than everybody else, and so they have the right to trample on our rights and to implement these extreme measures. And if, 9/11, of course, don't get me started with that, but it's again a similar situation. The elites saying we need a new Pearl Harbor or we won't get the changes that we need. And so they manufactured that new Pearl Harbor. Could the same thing be happening with geoengineering programs and spraying toxic chemicals into our atmosphere? Well, if they're convinced that there's this horrendous global warming crisis coming at us or whatever, or maybe they're convinced that our military needs it for global dominance, I wouldn't put it past them. I wouldn't put anything past them. How about you, Mike?
Well, let's kind of take a look at what's going on. There are a couple of different theories about why this is happening. And I think knowing that there's a new world order, one world government agenda, I think it's kind of foolish to assume that those who are in power are working in the best interest of the American people. So when the scientists come out and they say, and I just interviewed G. Edward Griffin, that video's up on YouTube, and he said what they're going to do when people find out, they're going to come out into the public and they're going to say, look what we're doing for you. Look, we're saving the planet. And G. Edward Griffin said, in my most humble opinion, I don't think that this is good at all for us. So with that being said, they say it's to mitigate global warming. Other people say it could be part of the HARP program, which is a weather modification program. It also has properties to create what would appear to be natural disasters like earthquakes and tsunamis. Go ahead and Google that if you're not aware of that. And then some people say it might be part of a depopulation agenda. But we know that there's an agenda because it's been stated by many of the elite that the population has to be reduced below 500 million. And that's about a 94% reduction in the population. Now, if you look at what aluminum barium does to the human being, it's very toxic to us. And if you remember years back, people quit cooking with aluminum pots and pans because of the dangers of aluminum. Many people have even quit using antiperspirant. And aluminum is very toxic to us. It also causes Alzheimer's, high blood pressure, and a bunch of other things. Barium reduces our immune system. So, we don't have proof that this is part of the depopulation agenda. However, we do know, because it's been openly spoken about by people like Bill Gates, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, that there is an agenda. So, is this part of it? I can't answer that question, but what we do know, we do have a mountain of evidence suggesting, not only suggesting, but to prove that the airplanes are spraying and exactly what they're spraying. That's the aluminum, the barium, the strontium, and God knows what else they're spraying up there and how it can affect us. So absolutely, I do believe that this is part of a broader agenda.
Well, listeners, what do you think? Is this really going on? And if so, what in the world are these crazy people up to? Feel free to call in. We're at 512-879-3805. That's 512-879-3805. Well, one aspect of this that floors me, Mike, is the complete mainstream media blackout on these topics that would be so important if they were true. And there seems to be enough evidence that any respectable journalist would at least look into them carefully, because, my God, if this is true, it's such a huge story, and yet we're not seeing anything on geoengineering programs and these metals being sprayed into the atmosphere on the front pages of our newspapers. How do you explain the failure of the media to cover these enormously important topics?
Well, and one would think that this would be a huge story until you look at really who owns the media. An ex-CIA director publicly said, the CIA owns anyone of any significance in the mainstream media. So if anybody's shaking their head, let's go a little bit deeper in that. I will go to the Asilomar meeting, which was held a couple weeks ago, and I wrote an article on this event as well. This is Asilomar because we broke the story on aluminum, and people started testing, and now you'll find things all over the Internet. They banned any transparent reporting. They allowed reporters to come in, but they restricted them on what they could bring out of there. They didn't let anybody report on a day-to-day basis, and they also approved what could be brought out of the meeting. So the meeting was very secretive, and ironically enough, anything that came out of that geoengineering meeting, there was nothing about aluminum. There was nothing that was reported on that could even have an impact on making any positive change with that. So, and let's go a little bit deeper on this. If this is true, which we have evidence that proves that it does, these are crimes. This is a multi-billion, if not trillion-dollar worldwide operation, and it's illegal. So to think that there's not going to be a cover-up, there absolutely is with a program like this. But we are, we're beginning to see things on the alternative media that's being covered, and it has been also covered in some mainstream media outlets, but they've only reported it a couple of times, and they haven't gone on with that. So, and let's look who funds the corporate mainstream media. You have companies like GE. You have other companies like Raytheon who are involved with this. Raytheon has an involvement with this program and also with the patents. So do you think they're going to come out and tell people, we're spraying aluminum, it's very toxic, and it's going to hurt and kill a lot of you, and it's also going to completely destroy the environment? No, they're going to keep this a secret.
And
there's a lot of money, and a lot of political interests that are associated with this program.
Right, but how about the respectable or so-called respectable sort of left-leaning alternative media outlets like The Nation and Mother Jones and Democracy Now! And so on? Those people, of course, have been terrible in covering issues like 9/11, CIA assassinations of domestic figures like Wellstone, Kennedy's, and so on. But why would they not be reporting on this? Is there a similar deep structural reason for that?
I can only assume that there might be. And again, we're starting to see these things come out. So this issue is just starting to explode. People are becoming aware and people are testing. But let's go back to, you're going to go back to and look at the JFK assassination. Who reported on that? And look at all the inconsistencies that we had initially. And that was kept very tight.